I think it would be very difficult to expect Hamas to be able to do that at this point. They only control a small part of the Gaza Strip. They're not in control in 80% of the Gaza Strip. There's a vacuum of governance, and I think that Hamas probably really doesn't know who's still alive and who's not. They have said that they believe that 70, at least 70 of the 134 hostages are no longer alive, and that number could be growing every day.
Why is it important for Israel to negotiate a deal now, even if a partial one, to get their citizens released?
Well, Israel should have been negotiating earnestly from day one in order to get these hostages home. Israel failed to protect them and has a moral responsibility to bring every single one of them home. Every day that they're left in Gaza is a risk to their lives. And if I were the Israeli negotiator or in charge of negotiations now, I would say, forget about the list. Don't give me a list. Give me the people. We'll get their names when they come out. Anyone who's alive that Hamas could deliver now in a deal is important to get every single one of them out. There will need to be a ceasefire for a deal. It's important to have a ceasefire now before the holy month of Ramadan begins in another 3 days from now. It's dangerous for the local scene, for the whole region, for the world, for this conflict to continue during the month of Ramadan, especially if there's a further Israeli military incursion to the 20% of the Gaza Strip that's left yet still in the hands of Hamas.
And Gershon, you believe more military pressure will not help to get these hostages home and could be very dangerous for them.
Right. I've maintained that the military pressure is not what's going to release the hostages. In fact, I believe very strongly that the military pressure is what's killing the hostages. The only deal that's been done so far was delayed by at least 2.5 weeks because of the military pressure, and there's been no deal in the last 4 months as a result of the military pressure. We need a timeout. We need clearer minds, calmer minds, coherent thinking to perhaps even find a diplomatic end to this conflict.
What would that look like? How can Israel bring all of the remaining hostages home alive?
I think if we're going to be honest, I would be very surprised if it's possible to bring all the hostages out. Perhaps all the living hostages are. There may be hostages under the rubble of buildings that have been destroyed in the war so far, and we may not get back all the hostages, particularly those who are dead. The process of finding a diplomatic end to this conflict will reside in the hands of the mediators, the Egyptians and the Qataris and the Americans and others who join in. We need to find a situation where Gaza, in the end, will not be controlled by Hamas anymore, where there can be some kind of honorable exit for the leaders of Hamas, a small group of leaders and perhaps their families that could go to Doha. And we need a resolution on the issue of the border crossing between Egypt and Gaza, so there can't be any more smuggling of weapons in. And then the Palestinians need to take charge and invite a multinational Arab-led force to come to Gaza to replace the Israelis. The Israelis cannot remain in Gaza. The longer they remain in Gaza, the more it will look like an occupation, and there will be armed insurgency against Israel. It's not a winning scenario for Israel to stay in Gaza.
How challenging is it, though, for Hamas, Qatar and Egypt to continue with the negotiations if Israel's not even there to take part in the talks?
Well, I think that it's impossible. In fact, I think that the hardening of positions announced the day before yesterday by Hamas is a reflection of not having an Israeli negotiating team in Cairo at the table ready to negotiate. The Egyptians cannot be the voice of Israel in the negotiations. They can't fulfill that role. The Israelis need to be there, and we need to sit in the room until the white smoke comes out.
Just finally, of the thousands of Palestinian prisoners, one in particular you believe could play a pivotal role in achieving post-war stability?
Right. Marwan Barghouti is in prison for 22 years. He was the leader of the Second Intifada. He's the most popular Palestinian politician, comes out on top in every Palestinian election poll. It is presumed that when there will be elections, Marwan Barghouti will be elected president. I know Marwan for many years. I know that he supports the two-state solution, and despite the fact that the Israelis treat him as a murderer and responsible for the death of Israelis, that's the nature of conflicts. Yesterday's fighters are today's leaders, and we need a person who's strong like Marwan Barghouti to lead the Palestinian people toward a peace deal with Israel. We also need leaders in Israel. Our current leaders are not capable, are not interested in negotiating peace with the Palestinians.
Dr. Gershon Baskin, thanks so much for talking to us. We really appreciate your time and analysis.
Thank you.